Okay, so kind of moving on now, another fun topic. So the old spay neuter
Yep.
conversation. The traditional, kind of 6 month rule versus what you're hearing a lot with large breeds and sporting breeds, the 18 months, 2 years, after the first estrus cycle, whatever. So I'll let you kind of go down that hole.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's an easier conversation than most people want to make it. I think the problem is that there's kind of two segments out there right now, and it's the 6 months, right? The veterinary clinic that every dog gets the same protocol. Let's spay and neuter at 4 to 6 months, and then I think we saw the shift of we have breeders and people that don't their lifestyle is okay for intact dogs, where now we can't spay and neuter anything, and it's an individual conversation, right? And so, in an ideal world for the health of these dogs, we want them to grow and get to a mature body weight. And so, particularly like with male dogs, it's something that we know that the testosterone influences the closure of the growth plates. And so, as a sporting dog veterinarian, I can walk in a room and 95% of the time I can tell you if the dog was spayed or neutered early in life or not. In just based on their stature, they look different if they're spayed and neutered early. And so from that aspect, then when's the ideal time? With the male dogs, it's probably in that 18 to 24 months or later. And so that's also not a magic sort of thing, where you get that dog to that stage and it's not like, well, we got to neuter him now or all hell's going to break loose. And so I'll use my male setter as an example. My plan was to neuter him at 2 years of age. We got to 2 years of age and he was the least male acting dog that I'd ever owned. And so I was like, well, why the hell am I going to neuter him? Like, I'm not going to gain anything from that because his behavior's great. Everything's fine about him. Then around 5, he started showing some male characteristics that I didn't really like and was a little bit annoying. And so I neutered him at 5 and he's been good to go. He's still athletic. He's, a physical specimen. And so I think it's that everybody wants this magic number and there isn't. In an ideal world with a male dog after 18 to 24 months. And so, it's a fluctuating scale, right? A male cocker is going to hit that mature body weight quicker than a male Labrador. On the female side, it gets a little bit trickier. In an ideal world, like as a veterinarian, just that hates to do space because I just hate to do the surgical procedures, that spay is way easier before they go
Yeah,
through a heat cycle. I
yeah,
think the body of evidence has shown that if they go through a heat cycle, we probably get some protective effects. And for the longest time in my career, we always cited a study that, if we spay them before their first heat cycle, we're going to increase incidence of mammary cancer. We had all these things that I think just justified it's easier on us to do that surgery earlier. I think we know now that that was a poor study. In places that they have more intact females, they don't see that increased risk. A lot of the mammary tumors that we see in dogs, if caught early, are treatable with excision. And so that risk I think was overplayed for probably decades in veterinary medicine. The thing with females is like, then when's the magic time to spay them? And so having an intact female in the house is a pain in the butt. And
yeah,
I've
for
lived with a
sure.
bunch of them, and it's breeders will tell you it's 9 days coming in, 9 days during, 9 days going out, thinking that you're going to have a dog that's going to bleed for 9 days, and it's not. They bleed for about 27 days. And so
Yep.
you're having sweet heat pants and swapping them out. If you have a dog that you leave alone at home out of a kennel with the heat pants on, inevitably they get to a point where they want to cover that smell. And so they start eating the heat pants. And then I've done foreign body surgery on a number of dogs. It's just a pain in the butt. And so, most people, if they're not going to breed that dog, one heat cycle and then spay is probably the way to go. But there's not a magic number there either. And so, the flip side of it is if we leave that female intact and we don't breed her, as she gets older, she becomes more prone to conditions like pyometra, which is a pus-filled uterus, because the female dog is unique in that it thinks it's pregnant whether it gets bred or not. So basically that uterus after a heat cycle is an incubator for 60 to 70 days. If we happen to get bacteria in there, it's going to incubate the bacteria just like it would the puppies, and that's where it becomes problematic. So the females is a little bit different conversation just because there's probably benefit in actually keeping a female intact longer with some of the studies with cancer and longevity and things like that, but it becomes a pain in the butt on the owner aspect. And so why I say it's an easy conversation. It's a conversation that each individual owner needs to have a discussion with, right? So I can lay out that, hey, it's best for you to have this female maybe go through a heat cycle But if you push back and say, with my lifestyle, my house, my husband won't allow it because we can't, or my wife, that owner, we may have to spay that dog at that 6 to 7 months, knowing that we're maybe sacrificing some health issues for that dog to be a happy member of the house. And same way with intact males. There's some dogs that are assholes at a very early age, and it's some of those dogs getting those testicles off sooner is
Yeah.
what we have to do. But we have that conversation. Hey, your dog may be prone to ACL issues or other issues down the road because we're neutering them early. And so it's to me, it's an individualized thing. And where I run is the people that say you have to do it at 6 months or you never have to do it. It's a discussion that should be had about what your goal is with that dog, what the health benefits are, and what the health risks are.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've seen it, with my dogs, it was kind of the same thing as, I knew from the biological standpoint, understanding, the testosterone and how it affects the body. Like I knew with working the breed and how energetic they are, I didn't want to take the chance of, neutering early and, dealing with some musculoskeletal issues, maybe later on in the field.
Right.
I also knew I wanted to breed them, like I talked to you last time, my female had entropion in both eyes. So, breeding her was out the window, but still wanted to wait a full estrus cycle for her. And it was a pain in the butt. I was one and done. I'm like, okay, like we got
Right.
her to a good weight, the one and done. I'm like, we're obviously not breeding her. So it's time. My male is still intact. He just turned 2. And now we're going to be moving into the stage where we want to breed him. His disposition is great. He's a really good looking pointer. He's got a really good, hunt drive and just all the above. So, I wouldn't mind breeding him a couple times before it's time to go under the procedure. Now the question is with that too, is there, I've read in the past kind of some magical age numbers, like they say, kind of like what you did with your dog, that 5 or 6 year old stage that you start at some point increasing risk of some type of cancers and things like that, keeping dogs intact. And really after that 5 or 6 year old window, breeding should kind of maybe slow down and maybe think then. I mean, is there any truth to that?
No, I don't. I mean, like testicular cancers in dogs are pretty easy catchable and solvable. And so, I don't think I've ever in 20 plus years had a dog have a metastasized testicular tumor. Usually, if we remove it, it's fine. I don't think there's any literature out there either that shows like the longer a dog's intact, the more prone they are to cancers. I think the opposite is actually what most of the literature points at. And so I don't, the big thing like with breeding beyond those stages, I think there's a lot of male dogs that probably do fine. And we have dogs well past 10 on the male side of things that are still having viable litters. The females is a different story. I think, you start getting that 6, 7 window. I start feeling like those bitches are probably getting a little beyond when we should be breeding them. Of course, there's the exceptions. There's that really athletic female that, handles pregnancy and whelping really well. I've had a few clients that'll breed out to 8, which is beyond where I'm comfortable with. But, if it's that specific bitch that we're doing it for a reason, it usually will turn out okay as well. So it's not more the health issues. So like on the females, the longer they're intact, we worry about pyometras and things along those lines. With the males, there's really not like, anything that I get horribly worried about. Prostate issues we see in both neutered and unneutered dogs. And so it's one of those things that, we get, the prostatic hyperplasia in the intact dogs, but we'll see prostatic cancers in the neutered dogs. And so I think that, most of the trade-off on the male dog is pretty equal from a health standpoint. It's really behavioral more than anything, in my opinion.